Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist, and Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent studio. How are you, lads?
Good, JD.
Good.
You were in Kerry last week. Were you a bit closer to home this week?
I was in Dublin 8, yeah.
Okay.
So down to watch St Patrick's Athletic in Shelbourne last night, yeah. So
Duff watch.
Well, it wasn't quite Damien Duff watch, but I mean, you end up watching.
We need to stop that as well, don't we?
You end up watching him a lot, though. I mean, you know, like it's quite natural. Like full-time whistle, St Pat's win. Tim Clancy goes over to shake hands with Damien Duff. Damien Duff just walks straight onto the pitch, not having any of the post-match handshakes.
Is that a regular thing for Damien?
It wouldn't be the first time, but there'd be a bit of beef between these benches. There's been a few disagreements.
You almost need kind of one of these sky cams then on this. Handshake, non-handshake. Because if this happened in the Premier League now, it'd be a big deal.
Yeah,
and it's Damien Duff. Like I don't know, Dan, is he blotting his copybook a bit? It's a bit unedifying to do that. But I don't know what the story.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been obviously. There's times where like the sincerity of the handshake after a match can be overrated anyway, right? Like
Big time.
I mean, in life maybe, you know, like you can shake a lot of people's hands in life and just you mightn't necessarily want to, but you do it. But like you're kind of watching Duff going, is he going to go to the referee here? And actually he just went on and shook the referee's hand and he was in his own world. But I think Tim Clancy looked to be trying to get his attention, but there was sendings off last year. Sideline sendings off in the games between Alan Quinn, another ex-Ireland international, was on Damien Duff's staff. Him and Tim Clancy had a right falling out after one game, and there's no love lost, to say the least. But I mean, there was a bit of. I mean, the game itself wasn't terrific, and Duff's team probably they had 11 corners to 3, I think. Shells 8 corners in the second half. While at times they were quite sort of combative and physical. They did have their moments, but they got done by the one corner Pats had in the second half. So I'm guessing Damien Duff, he's a competitor. He's not in great form after either.
My late father, was in church once and he had his coat stolen. And he says, I just can't believe I shook hands with the fella.
And that was the priest. That is a bit mad. But four sellouts last night as well.
Was it a sellout?
It was, yeah, and I think it was. I mean, maybe Shells mightn't have taken up every bit of their allocation, but I think 4 out of the 5 games last night in the Premier, there was no tickets available for locals. There was apparently in the Bows Dundalk game there was people touting outside or whatever. So it's
who would have thought it?
It's definitely it's quite hard to get into some places at the moment. So you need the game. I mean, I wouldn't say the game last night was a classic, right? But there's a point where you obviously want to give people more bang for their buck. But I think, to be fair, the attendances last year held up across the piece, and I reckon there's a fair chance it'll happen again this year.
Nearly 2,500 in Galway for a first division game.
Were you in Galway?
I wasn't. I was at Dundalk at the races actually. So
new horse. We can't really talk about that.
The funny thing was, so I got the train to Dundalk to watch the horse, and went into the railway bar, which Dan will probably know from Dundalk. It's very near Oriel, and even though Dundalk were playing away, there's so many people in Dundalk wearing Dundalk gear. Even at the races, you can see people wearing Dundalk gear, and a lot of people were talking about the game against Bows, which they lost, but it's a proper football town, and Dundalk will feel under a little bit of pressure now. They play Pats, I think, in their next game, and they've only 1 point from their first 2, so yeah, lots to talk about in the League of Ireland.
I follow an account called Footy Scran on Twitter. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes.
Is there any League of Ireland grant just for the experiential thing for new people maybe going, that does good grub or that kind of thing? Or is it?
It's funny, I went into Pat's last night pretty early, and I decided to go for a walk around the ground just to see what they actually have. And they have a crepes place behind the goal.
Okay.
It's like Dublin 8 has totally been gentrified here. There was a burger van. There was at least 2 burger vans, but then you're sort of there's some other fella there is ordering his crepe with Nutella, and I'm like, I mean, what's happening? We've completely, this isn't the essence of football. But there was one last year, that Footy Scran account, there is occasionally League of Ireland grounds pop up on that. I think there was one last year, was it where someone clearly went, some fan of an opposing club.
It was a Bows fan, I think.
A Bows fan went to the game, bought chips, but clearly brought a Dairy Lee slice, and then just opened the Dairy Lee slice, put it on the chips, and said cheese and chips at Oriel Park. And this was going around the world. This was going around the world going, this is a disgrace. It was a little bit unfair. But,
my God.
David Connolly's not having it.
David Connolly, good afternoon. You've been to a lot of matches recently. I've seen your Twitter account. I think you've been to Fulham quite a bit, and you've been to some good matches.
It sounds like you've been stalking me there.
I've got a boring life, David.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around. I guess, been to a few games of late. So, yes, I haven't tasted the pre-match or the post-match food. That's the only thing. But you get well looked after, I think, when you go to these grounds nowadays.
You do. I was at Charlton there. I can't remember if I ate, but it looked good. It was around October time. You been to any matches of interest in terms of any Irish players or anything like that you've seen?
Well, let me think at the top of my head. I mean, I was at Millwall last week. I mean, Millwall are flying. I mean, Millwall are doing brilliantly. And Danny McNamara, I mean, I don't know how far Danny can be away from a shout for the senior side, because Danny was in my youth team when I was in Millwall's. When I retired, I took Millwall's youth team for a season, and Danny was our right back. And I mean, it wasn't the best game he has played, but they and Millwall, I know maybe is will always have it could possibly have an issue in terms of being a less glamorous team, but nonetheless, there's no reason to overlook players. He must have well over 100 plus championship games under his belt, and he's doing very, very well, and Millwall are doing well. So I've mentioned Danny before, but there must come a time where he'll be there or thereabouts. I'm sure. Danny's
he's playing fullback.
I don't think he's like, he has been mentioned once or twice, David, by Stephen Kenny in dispatches. Like, I don't think he's a million miles away.
No,
I suppose I'm just curious. Is it right back or right wing back? Because obviously in the Irish, in the Irish context, like, it's right wing back is probably the position you'd be looking at there, and there's probably the Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman, but then it's the Alan Brown. Is it Cyrus Christie? I would have thought he's one who could come into the equation definitely for the wider squad for sure. He has been mentioned. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you'd imagine he could be in a bigger squad that gets cut down. At least you kind of get him in, and because Millwall. I remember when I was coming through. I mean, obviously Mick McCarthy was the manager. Mark Kennedy. It always seemed to have an Irish player coming. Yeah, exactly, coming through. Richie Sadlier.
Yeah.
And so Danny can't be too far away.
Yeah, I don't know, was that the Millwall Burnley game or was another game, but I see Idemo Amaku, who was at Shamrock Rovers for the last couple of years, joined Burnley over the winter. He came on, joined Millwall over the winter, and he came on for a couple of minutes towards the end of one of their games recently. Now he's like, we would have seen a lot of Idemo last year. He's pretty raw still, like, got a bit to go. He wouldn't have been first choice for Rovers at all, but Millwall felt he had a little bit of potential and
scored in Europe, of course.
Yeah, like, they are flying, Millwall. Like, they're having a really good season with the Championship. I mean, the thing about it from the Irish perspective this year in the Championship, we always talk about the Irish numbers in the Premier League. It does look like we're in a position that whatever happens there's going to be some Irish players going up, because you've got Sheffield United,
Burnley,
and you've got Burnley, so you've got Josh Cullen and Obafemi look to be definitely going up, and Sheffield United in a reasonably good position. The biggish game against Watford today, they've got John Egan, they've got Enda Stevens obviously, so and then there are a couple of clubs around the playoff situation with a bit of an Irish presence as well too.
And Millwall have scored 1-0 away to Stoke, West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0, Reading 1, Blackpool 0, Sheffield United 0, Watford 0, as you say, QPR 0, Blackburn 0, Norwich 0, Cardiff 0, Preston 0, Wigan 0, Burnley 1, Huddersfield 0 already. So I'm just checking the score there. It's not Obafemi. Bristol 0, Hull 0, Birmingham 0, Luton 0, and a result: Coventry 2, Sunderland 1. All the Premier League games that kicked off with 3 are goalless: Everton, Villa, Leeds, Southampton, Leicester, Arsenal, and West Ham against Nottingham Forest. This is Football Saturday and Off the Ball, brought to you by Sky. The Premier League is back. Watch every live game for the rest of the season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports with the Republic of Ireland former international striker David Connolly, Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward. You can also, as well as listening across the country on News Talk, watch us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter and on the OTB Sports app. You'd like to text us 53106. Like to hear from Arsenal and Man City fans this afternoon. They're both playing. But are Man United are also in this title race, I wonder? The way they're playing, United supporters, do you feel a connection now with the club again after all these years? If you did lose the bond, Liverpool supporters, what does your club need to do to get back on track? Were you at a League of Ireland game like Dan was last night? Tell us about it. And also please send your tributes, if you can, to John Motson, the great BBC commentator who passed away on Thursday. So David Connolly, Arsenal, they won at Villa. And Nketiah dropped today for Trossard. Do they have enough up front to push through and win this title?
Well, I mean, say today, I mean, look, no Maddison for Leicester. So you look at Leicester and you go, well, if there was a time where maybe they could, I mean, they're dominating the ball by the looks of it. They've had something like 78% possession. If there's a time to beat Leicester, it's now. But have they got enough? Is kind of right. I mean, that central position is. I don't think it'd do any harm taking Nketiah out, right? Because I think he's one of those players that did brilliantly coming off the bench, grabbed a few goals early doors, playing week in week out is a kind of is a position he hasn't found himself in, and sometimes that can be a drain, mentally as well as physically. So look, that's why he signed the likes of Leandro Trossard, right? And that's why the squad is so strong that we've touched on. That he can come in, and I mean, Trossard's is, I don't know who else you could get for 30, 40 million or whatever. I mean, he's kind of as good as you could get. So I have a feeling they might nick an away win today, but I think it will be close because look, they're not they certainly don't have that out and out, goal scorer. The main worry for them would be if anything happened to Bukayo Saka. I mean, if anything happened to him, then I think their season might come off the rails. But whilst he's fit, I mean, they have always got a chance, And obviously, Jorginho coming in has strengthened them. But I mean, if you got Saka, I think you still got a chance, even if you don't have someone banging in the goals.
I think Arsenal's biggest strength at the moment is that Man City just look vulnerable. They really do, and I don't know if you saw the game the other night, JD. But
I see every single game.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it, David, but I just thought the Pep thing on the pitch afterwards was a bit bizarre, because it was. You're looking at the body language of the players, and particularly Haaland, who kind of struggled, and who was Pep talking to? And Gundogan seemed to be the guy that he maybe was the most eye contact in terms of the two of them. But why did he have chastised them on the pitch after the game?
He didn't chastise them. He was pepping them up. He was giving them a hug. Yeah.
I think you're very animated about this game the other night, Johnny, because you got involved. I think there's a danger of forgetting it's like a first leg.
It
wasn't about winning the 90 minutes.
Yeah.
In Leipzig, and there was a good atmosphere. Yeah, they were really good in the second half.
They played very well for about 60 minutes of the game.
It's about winning. You were invested in a 90-minute win for them, but it was they weren't. In the sense of it's a two-legged tie. I think they've had bigger issues recently
as well, though.
Yeah, that's more of an issue than Leipzig.
But you've got a point. They're not winning matches as easily as they maybe could or have in the past.
No, and I think teams are sort of, if not figuring them out. I thought Man City were excellent in the first half the other night, but when Leipzig kind of started to maybe believe in themselves a bit, this is one of the Christians that would have a Pep and as Dan says, a two-leg game. They should win, albeit I wouldn't be certain they'd beat them at home, but they should win. But in the second half, the tide was clearly turned against them, and Pep did nothing. He made no changes, which I thought was just strange. They look a bit vulnerable. When they couldn't hold on last Saturday, I think would have been very worrying for their title challenge.
I feel it was a strange one to get rid of Cancelo. Maybe he was a bad influence, David Connolly, in the dressing room. But at the left back, they've looked a bit. They put Bernardo Silva there in one game. Yeah. I know Ake's been playing there, but it just seems a bit of a strange one for me if they're looking to win the Champions League and win the Premier League.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, look, we don't know what goes on, right? Yeah. But I've spoken about Pep before in terms of how he does seem to fall out. Every manager's going to fall out. You can't keep 20, 30 players happy, can you? That's for sure. But you think he may be at this point in the season, maybe he could have kept João Cancelo happy. Or even if he was unhappy, he would have kept him just to keep the ranks as strong as he can. Because, I mean, look, he's a hard interview, right? That guy, Pep, isn't he? I mean, I find him really difficult. It must be a nightmare to try and get stuff out of him. I know he must be sick and tired of talking to the press, but that's his job, right? I mean, that's what he gets paid a lot of money to do. And he gets asked probing questions to justify selections. I think, about Bernardo Silva when he played left back, and maybe he might have been at fault one of the goals last week. And He's spiky. You know, he is spiky. He can get rattled, Pep. You know, I don't think it was a surprise that they didn't come away with a victory. I mean, going to Leipzig are in great form. They're doing brilliantly in the Bundesliga. I don't think it was a surprise. It might be a surprise that he made no changes, which he often does some things, doesn't he, as a coach or manager that are surprising. You look at the bench, you think, well, why didn't he maybe look at changing it with the players that he's got on the bench? You know, Phillips, if he wanted more control when they were lacking control, why not bring on Calvin Phillips? So it doesn't make sense. He kept all his defensive mids on the bench, and I mean he's won everything. He's a tactical genius. But sometimes he does seem very stubborn when he sticks to what he's trying to do.
Yeah, just on Haaland, because what do you make of Haaland? Been amazing, obviously, in the Premier League, 26 goals and 32 goals in total. But unless De Bruyne, who wasn't playing the other night, is there, it doesn't seem like there's a clear plan to get the ball to him.
Well, I mean, there were some clips on the telly, right, and it was pretty obvious that you can't lay it all down because he scored bundles of goals no matter who's playing behind him. But there is a real frustration when you look at him. You just feel that he absolutely needs the ball early. He needs the ball earlier from looking at him. And there was a couple of times he could have had it against Leipzig, a couple of times in other games he could have had it earlier. He needs it released in front of him. He needs it early. If it's going in the box, it needs to go early. That would be the only thing I would say. You know, you can't pick that many holes in his overall game, apart from maybe once or twice Bernardo Silva might have his head down and be a bit more of a ball carrier, whereas, you know, you might have someone else who's a bit more of a passer, release a longer ball. I mean, I know Trent's got a lot of criticism, right? But if you go back to, you know, the goal Núñez scored against Newcastle last week, the week before last. Yeah. When Trent Alexander-Arnold picked that ball up, if that was Erling Haaland, he would want the ball early and behind, like Trent played that pass to Núñez, you know. And you just think that he needs someone to play that longer pass, if it's De Bruyne or somebody else. Like he needs that. I think he needs an earlier, longer pass. But I mean, apart from that, I think he'll be back amongst the goals probably later on today.
He's having they're obviously hot favourites to win this evening, but he is having a poorish run by his standards. And if you think back to the game against Man United, where he just looked absolutely unplayable, and the goal he got there at the back post, which was like one of the greatest bits of athleticism that you'll see in terms of a player reaching the ball, and how bewildered Man United looked. And you fast forward a couple of months to where Man United are, and Haaland, for me, the other night was very, very frustrated, JD. He looked like, as David was saying, Man City they're probably guilty of overplaying the ball at times in terms of just passing it across and passing it like through the midfield and that and this or that, but they looked either reluctant or unwilling to pass the ball to Haaland, and he was getting frustrated. He did very decent chance in the second half when it was 1-0, dragged it badly wide, and I thought his body language, just thought he could have frustrated figure, and he's probably created an awful lot of hype by his ridiculous goal scoring record in the first sort of few months of the season. But at the moment, I think today will be big for him and big for City. Maybe he'll get back on track today, but for me, when Haaland is outside the box, he's not actually an unbelievable footballer. He needs to be in the box, and he needs to have something to run at. He didn't have either the other night, and he had a poor game. And teams, because he's so quick, teams aren't necessarily sitting back against Man City. So I think you can't play a high line against Man City with his pace. So they're sitting back, and it's hard to break down teams when Haaland's not getting the ball.
The rugby's back underway. Ireland 24 points, Italy 17 in Rome, so 42 minutes in the watch. We have the bonus point, but we need to win the game, and Italy have got a couple of tries as well. So this is on TV, and anybody listening to the radio will keep you right up to speed of what's happening. I think Jack Grealish has been City's best player in the last couple of months, David. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I moaned about this the last time I was on, in terms of, I think he was dropped for a game, Jack, and everyone said, fawning over Pep's tactical decisions to leave Jack Grealish out, and it was the right call to play Phil Foden. And I disagreed with that, but it felt like everyone thinks sort of Jack was he shouldn't be in the starting 11 or in the team. But I mean, I think he's he's so creative. I think that he has to get in the team. However, I think there will always be thrown at him that. And even the other night, I thought he carried the ball just that little bit too much. He came inside just that little bit too much. And I dare I say it, he looked a bit predictable, right? And we all know he plays off the left, likes to come in field, etc. But it just felt like once or twice he just did that a couple of times too many, And I'm a massive fan of his, but it just looked like he just came inside once or twice too many.
What would he be like playing through the middle, David?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think obviously he's so well balanced he can go off both sides, right? So I would have him on the pitch. It doesn't mean if he's not. It's often if he's not working for him, he takes him off and he brings Foden on, or he brings someone else on, But I'd like to see him just stay on the pitch, and as you say, he can move more centrally and have more of an impact and open up both sides of the pitch a little bit more. So I think he's terrific, and I actually just like him as a person. So I'm more inclined to give him a little bit of leeway because I think he's I don't know. He's just, I like him. He's obviously, makes the odd mistake off the pitch. He's not perfect. He gives good interviews. I like that he's not, he doesn't give platitudes and stuff. I warmed to him. Look, I know he didn't play for Ireland, but he chose England. But I like him.
He's Jack the lad, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And what? He's got a bit of character, right? And he can, and you can't kind of seem to be losing that in football. So half the time the interviews post-game are dreadful. No one says anything. He comes on, he's got a smile on his face. You kind of want him, I kind of want him to do, to do well. And for sure, I think he could be in that team. But I did think the other night he came inside just a bit too often.
I've sympathy for him as well, though, because I thought, I don't know how many times he was fouled in the game, but it was incessant, and the referee generally wasn't booking the Leipzig player, and it was just constant, and he was getting a bit frustrated. And as I mentioned, Leipzig were playing obviously quite deep in the first half, so Grealish, as David mentioned, he obviously has an inclination to come in on his right foot, but he would then be faced with like a mass of bodies in front of him, was often fouled, and I think he probably needs a bit more protection from referees as well, JD, because these are the players that you want to see flourish.
We have goals in the Championship. Burnley now 2-0 up against Huddersfield. Is Vincent Kompany going to be the next City manager?
We didn't mention the man on loan from Burnley at Coventry. Young Luke McNally did a massive win again today, JD. 2-1 win over Sunderland. Absolutely flying at Coventry, on the cusp of the playoffs at the moment.
Going to have to be on commission for Luke McNally at this stage.
Yeah, he's been on our podcast.
So I was in Coventry a few months ago.
Yeah, it was.
He wasn't there at the time. He was in Burnley at the time.
Yeah, he's a three at the back as well. He's playing right side. He seems to love the three at the back, and he shouldn't be ignored, I think, in terms of Ireland chat going forward. He's probably a little bit off, but like he's flying it at Coventry.
He's a very good player, but he will never be ignored in this show, because you'll get a Luke McNally mention every week from Johnny.
Well, Galway United mention came in early, so we have to.
Luke McNally is the new Galway United.
Oh, okay.
Right, so
listeners out there, just your.
If Luke McNally mentioned, take a drink. We know, even if it's just a soft drink.
No,
whatever,
it has to be a soft drink. It's more bingo. I was talking about bingo. Will you win the money if Johnny mentions Luke McNally? QPR 1, Blackburn 1, Reading 1, Blackpool 0, Stoke 0, Millwall 1, and West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0. I'm saying all this because there haven't been any goals in the Premier League games. Oh, there has been. Just as I speak, Arsenal have scored away to Leicester 1-0, subject to VAR, as I always say. And the man we said, Leandro Trossard, has scored. We could have told you this 10 minutes ago, and he did. 1-0 away to Leicester. So big result that could be.
Did they win the league, JD? Did they win the league?
No, they don't. No.
They don't. No.
I'm telling you, I just can't really. Man United are the team with the momentum, and I don't think they're that far off. I just don't know if Rashford can keep the scoring run going.
Yeah, but
if they can keep enough players.
They're not reliant on Rashford necessarily either. Like they are. Even Fred. Fred is like scoring goals with his chin. Like he's playing well. The belief that and the atmosphere in Old Trafford the other night. There's something happening at Man United.
The three teams that Arsenal are winning, but it's subject to VAR. It's got the VAR now, Leon.
No.
There you go. So we try to be first, but we always give you a little disclaimer. The terms and conditions apply.
It's subject to VAR, really, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. But one thing about it, European football is much better. I didn't even notice VAR was there for the Liverpool Real Madrid game. It's whatever way the Premier League are doing it differently, doesn't seem to be as efficient and as fluid as the European way.
Yeah, and VAR couldn't save them from. I don't know. Liverpool at the moment, they're very, very tricky game this evening.
What I want you to do is hold that thought. We're going to take a break. It's like bullseye here. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 this evening. This is Football Saturday. Let's just bring you up to date on scores elsewhere. Ireland 24, Italy 17. The bonus points have been secured 4 tries, but No scores in the second half, 12 minutes in Rome. So we'll just keep you right up to date. Ireland at the moment with the possession, with the ball. That goal was ruled out, Leandro Trossard. So VAR intervened. Leicester Arsenal 0-0. West Ham 0, Nottingham Forest 0, Leeds 0, Southampton 0, Everton 0, Aston Villa 0 in the Championship. Coventry 2, Sunderland 1 a result. Goalless between Birmingham and Luton, Bristol City and Hull. Burnley now 3-0 up against Huddersfield. Norwich 1, Cardiff 0 at Adas. Preston 0, Wigan 1. QPR 1, Blackburn 1, Reading 1, Blackpool 0 as latest score. Sheffield United 0, Watford 0, Stoke 0, Millwall 1, West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0. In Scotland in the Premiership, Kilmarnock 1, Motherwell 0, Ross County 2, Dundee United 0. Goalless in the games involving Aberdeen and Livingston and St Johnstone and St Mirren. Also, in Get Games, we have score updates. Antrim 3-8, Fermanagh 1-11 in Division 3 of the Football League. We also have in the Hurling League, Division 2A, Kerry 1-8, Offaly 15 points. In Division 1 of the Ladies Football League, sponsored by Lidl, Kerry 1-11, Meath 6 points. And in the Camogie League, Division 1A, Dublin 1-3, Tipperary 1-9. In the rugby earlier in the United Rugby Championship, Ulster beat Sharks 31-24. In racing, Zenta 9-4 on was the winner of the Grade 3 Juvenile Hurdle at Ferryhouse. Lord North won the Winter Derby at Linkfield 11-8 on. Joseph O'Brien won the Adonis Juvenile Hurdle at Kempton with Nusrat at 7-2. Darryl Jacob riding that. Pendle Novices Chase there was won by Solo, the 11-4 shot for Paul Nicholls. David Connolly, where did you begin with Liverpool? Does Jurgen Klopp take any of the blame or responsibility for this, or is it more about things beyond his control, like injuries and a lack of money?
I tell you what, look, the other night at 2-0 up, I was watching it with my son, and I was like, oh, well, that's this game over, and then like he just laughed in my face about 20 minutes later. Goodness me, I mean, they were absolutely shredded, as my son said, and they were. I mean, defensively, if you look at the goals, right, they were awful, And when you're playing these sides, the absolute very, very best, the very best, who turn it on in the moments when they need to turn it on. The defending. I mean, you go back to the first goal from Vinicius Junior. If you watch it really carefully, the little 1-2 that Benzema and that played with Vinicius Junior. Jordan Henderson tries to read that Vinicius Junior is going to play the ball back to Karim Benzema, and because he tries to read it and he basically moves 2 yards towards Karim Benzema. That opens up the gap completely for Vinicius to turn, get faced up, and look, it's a great goal. But my point being, against these sorts of teams, trying to gamble that a player like Vinicius is going to set the ball back to Karim Benzema. You can't do that, because these players are of such a high level. They might have seen out of the corner of their eye your shadow moving, and that is all they need. That is all Vinicius needed to go, oh, I'm not going to play that ball back to you, Karim. I can get turned now because Jordan Henderson's come out of his little slot. And you can touch on a lot of the other goals. What you're getting at is it symptomatic of is that atypical Liverpool at the minute, I guess, right? Lots of these types of performances, and is it going to improve? I mean, you think at one point they turn a corner and then they play. I mean, Luka Modric strolling through the midfield late on, and you've got the youth of Liverpool in Bacecic, and you've got the experience of Fabinho. Neither of them do the right thing, which is take him out. So all the little bits and pieces at the very highest level, they were lacking in, and you can go through that game, go through the whole game and the goals, things they could have done better. Joe Gomez, passing back to Alisson. Greatest respect to Alisson. I don't think he's the most accomplished with the ball at his feet. It is Alisson's fault, but nonetheless, I would still say, any outfield player is better with the ball at his feet than going back to the goalie. Can Joe Gomez find a way rather than going back to Alisson? The marking for Militao's goals, dreadful. Zonal marking, but I mean, if Trent's not going to go with Militao, he's got to pass him on to somebody. But there was no one stationed in the sort of 6-yard zone. They were way too deep.
If that were an under-9s game, David, you'd be like, sorry, what? Yeah, honestly, what was that about?
Yeah. It was because, look, if you're zonal and Trent stays in that position, you can't critique Trent Alexander-Arnold because he's meant to stay in his zone. But it wasn't clear whether he was staying in his zone. Because if he stays in his zone, then someone's got to he's got to pass that runner on, and someone in a zone further ahead of him, nearer the middle of the box, has got to take Militao. But obviously, when the ball is fired in like that, you are not going to react in half a second. You've then got to call out to Fabinho, left shoulder. He's not going to get there in time. And there was just a huge gap there, wasn't there, to play the ball into, which they didn't fill with another zone, because it was like their zones were in one line. There wasn't another staggered zone, or there wasn't players blocking or anything like that. I mean, the goals were absolutely, they were dreadful. I mean, you don't need me to say that. Everyone can see that. Jurgen Klopp can see that at the very highest level. Little details and big details were all missing in that performance the other night. And at 2-0 up, it looked like it was going to be a stroll for them.
The funny thing is, it's not a great Real Madrid side. Like, they've got a lot of attacking talent, but
they're not winning their own league.
Not winning their own league. They're 8 behind, I think.
Nothing unusual about that, though, right? Like the Champions League is sort of
different.
Yeah. I wouldn't. Like, I completely know, but that sometimes lulls people into a bit of a false sense of security too. I mean, they are a Champions League obsessed club,
Yeah, and I think Barca as well. I think Barca's mind is kind of on winning La Liga, and I'm not sure they'll be massively upset with the other night. But anyway, Real Madrid it's not a vintage side, and Liverpool, I thought Klopp just basically given up after the game was interesting.
Massive try for Ireland. Like, Paolo Garbisi brought it back to a 4-point game with a penalty 2024, but Bundy Aki has just touched down with his second try of the game. 29 points to 20. Ireland lead now in Rome. A bit of breathing space. A more than one score game. A conversion attempt to come. And Ireland, I'd say there's a bit of relief, even though they've got 5 tries in Rome. Italy have got 20 points on the board. So, yeah, it was looking a bit scary there for a moment. And Ireland's first points of the game coming 18 minutes into the second half.
Yeah, that's a knock on.
Oh, yeah, it's gone to the review.
Yeah, that's going to be subject to TMO. I think he's knocked the ball on there.
That'll be ruled out by for Bundy.
I think he knows that, actually. He's looking up. So it's Keenan again. Sorry, it's actually Hansen to Bundy Aki. He falls on the ground. He knocks the ball on there.
Yeah, we're going to be back to a 4-point game. We're going to be back to Italy 20, Ireland 24. But we'll confirm that.
Slightly squeaky bum time for Ireland here, because
that's what I just said. They haven't scored in the second half so far. They've got the bonus point, but Italy with 20 points on the board themselves. So, look, there's a lot of changes, 7 changes for this match, but not the kind of gap you want to see at the moment, but we'll confirm that. This is, though, football at the moment on Off the Ball, brought to you by Sky. Get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sport. Just to update you on the Premier League, where there are 4 matches kicking off at 3 and no goals in any of them. Everton, Aston Villa, Leeds, Southampton, Leicester, Arsenal and West Ham, Nottingham Forest. David Connolly, so what are the solutions for Liverpool? Are we talking about a big clear out of the first team? Obviously players coming back from injury like Kanate and Diaz, but are you looking at players like brilliant servants like Jordan Henderson, maybe, not being in the first team next season?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it will be, the cycle of they've tried to bring the age down of the team, right, in terms of the players they've brought in. And I'm sure, we've seen Núñez get amongst the goals. Diaz, I'm sure, will be a success. If Jota can ever stay fit, obviously he adds to it. But it does seem like, Sir Alex Ferguson was famous for this, wasn't he? I'm sure the lads would touch on that. But, the cycles of sides, they have tried to refresh it, right, for this season. But, I mean, and I'm not going to critique Jordan Henderson or anyone else there, but it does seem like they need, this, say, take obviously the Real Madrid, but the whole season as one aside, and there will be players like, I'm a massive fan of Trent Alexander-Arnold, and things like that, but I guess he will come into focus as defensively. Does he give them what they want? I guess every position, like if you're at any elite environment, every position will be analysed, right? Every position. It doesn't matter whether you've come through the ranks like a Trent Alexander-Arnold, or you've been signed for a lot of money. Every position has to be continually analysed and improved upon. And I'm sure this might be their season where they have to make big sweeping changes. And I'm a massive fan of loads of these players, but it just seems like maybe that gap. Are they going to close that gap if they continue what they're doing? Because it's either the players change or the manager changes, right? And unless you can suddenly get a real improvement from the players that they've got, and they'll be better next year. But the players that will be better next year, I think they will be better next year. But, Jordan Henderson's not getting any younger. Fabinho's not getting any younger. There might be a few players there that might be concerned about their position in the side. Yeah, for sure.
I think Kevin Doyle was interesting last week speaking about, listen to the same message from a manager, or maybe
because he takes the training sessions club.
Yeah, and I definitely think that there's something really badly wrong with Liverpool at the moment, and Klopp doesn't give the impression at this stage that he is actually able to turn it around. To me, I think they will need to refresh things, and will it get to a point where Klopp, who's one of the most popular managers that they've ever had with the fans, and the board have been sensible, will it get to a point where something has to give here? Because this has been a disgracefully bad season from Liverpool's perspective, considering where they were last season. Wouldn't have any faith in them beating Palace today, and he's been loyal to players, rightly or wrongly, who've just completely lost form. Henderson among them, in my view, and they've massive problems. They really have massive problems, and I don't think Klopp certainly doesn't give me the impression that he believes himself that he can turn it around now.
Do you believe he can turn it around?
Well, I completely agree with what David alluded to there, and we've spoken about it before, the cycles. It's a tough thing to do, and pretty touching it when you have something like. Spoke about it a bit with Joe during the week. Like when you have something like Salah and Mane and Firmino, say, that works so well, like you just hitting this perfect formula. It's just and like that. It's great that came together, but then you're sort of always looking to sort of recreate that, and maybe at times that was a great crutch for them, and people would have said, "Oh, maybe their midfield's not great," or, but they're fine, or like Van Dijk is just not at the level he was, and then you lose that sort of great trust that you have in him that allows you to be a brilliant risk-taking team because you have this sort of man mountain at the back. So again, like I suppose you've maybe one or two players going or hitting the wrong age, and it's exposing a few fault lines everywhere. But I mean, the message seems to be that he's going to stick around and stay. Now, managers always say that generally. Like, you very rarely get messages of managers saying, "Oh, I'm not sure about this." Okay, but that seems to be, although the ownership situation, again, that seems to be sort of fluid enough, from people definitely gone to being a little bit more open-minded. So all these factors will play into it. But I suppose the issue they would have when it goes, Man City are always going to be around, but when you have probably a revitalised Manchester United now, and Arsenal, whatever happens this season, whether they do it, it's hard to see them falling back dramatically. So it's a slight concern, definitely.
mean, lads, do you think, just touching on, do you think he's got the ruthless nature, Jurgen Klopp, or do you think he hasn't had to show that ruthless nature in terms of dispensing with players? I mean, you touched on, say, Pep Guardiola earlier. There's no doubt he is like a Sir Alex Ferguson. I think that he's got that ruthless side, and he always has done, hasn't he, with players?
Yeah. Maybe Klopp's a builder. Maybe Klopp is a builder of teams rather than somebody who cycles. Like, it's hard to imagine any club at the moment winning 13 Premier League titles like Ferguson did.
Yeah,
ever.
and
again,
that epic year where he got rid of the four big players, wasn't it? Ferguson, who kind of butchered the squad, invested in youth, and was ruthless when he needed to be. And
Konchaskas, Hughes, remember, all left.
Yeah, and you were like Alan
Keane himself.
Yeah,
they decided whatever about the rows. I think the rows are always just to the side of this. I think they decided Ferguson, Kyrgios, the Keane. Now it's not working anymore.
Yeah, and in fairness to Klopp, Salah, in hindsight, probably should have been let go rather than given a new contract. But I didn't forecast the season that Salah's had either. He's just not.
That would have been a very hard.
It would have been.
I just don't think he's got the serves, Johnny.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's way more than that. He's and also, like, in fairness to Liverpool, the injuries they've had up front have really, really hurt them. Their midfield is completely dysfunctional, and as Dan says, Van Dijk isn't the player he was. So you add all these things together, and they're basically a mid-table team now. But I don't know. I mean, I just can't see the players having the belief in Klopp that he can turn this around now, and he's alluded to himself, massive surgery is needed, but it's a little bit too late.
It's interesting on the whole thing of ruthlessness, isn't it, David? Like, Ten Hag made the big calls. He got Ronaldo out of the club. They've won 14 out of 18 games since Ronaldo left. He took Rashford out of the team when he overslept, and then he came on, he scored off the bench. He's been very, very just professionally clear about Maguire. No, you're not in the team. And like Arteta got Aubameyang out of Arsenal. You do need that. You do need to be able to stamp that. And like Klopp is such a massively brilliant presence. Like he almost dwarfs everything at Liverpool. So it's very hard to question somebody who's won everything at the club. But I suppose we're questioning: is there going to be a second act? Does he have a second act in him?
Yeah, exactly. And there was that image this week of Eric Ten Hag and Sir Alex Ferguson having dinner. And I'm sure Sir Alex probably looks at a few things that Eric Ten Hag has done and sees a little bit of himself in Eric Ten Hag, and as you say, in terms of he's had to make some difficult decisions about players being late, like Rashford. Ronaldo didn't come on against Spurs, did he? And then even in a friendly, he jettisoned him after that. He had to make some tough calls. Maybe those calls were a little bit easier though, right? I think for Eric Ten Hag. I think I'm not saying the Ronaldo one was easy, but I think it was easier than what maybe Jurgen Klopp is facing, because sometimes you have to preempt what's coming, right? To prevent a major slump, you have to see what's coming over the hill, and who knows? Maybe Jurgen Klopp hasn't. I think he tried to see what was coming in terms of the signings they made in the summer, but maybe those signings in the summer, coupled with I don't know whether it's accumulation of so many games, the players maybe. What I would like to see is a new. Something different that Liverpool do as a team, because they've played a pretty similar way for a long period, which is fine, right? Man City have played a 4-3-3, and they played that way by and large for the whole time. He's tried Grealish as a striker, he's tried Foden as a 9, right? He's had the fullbacks playing inverted, right? He's had some nuances, Pep, that he's brought into the sides that keep freshening up what he's got within the framework. I haven't, we couldn't say that we've seen that from Jurgen Klopp, right? We couldn't say we've seen a something nuanced or different from a Liverpool side within what they have. By and large, it's been the same formation, the same shape, the same players. A little bit different, maybe. Gakpo's come in, played down through the middle. A couple of times they've played two strikers with a diamond in midfield, but when they've played that, they got absolutely destroyed. Who's it? They lost, I think, 3 or 4. I can't remember who they lost to when they played that diamond. So my only hesitation, reticence about Klopp, but refreshing things is you want to see, has he got anything completely different? Maybe that other managers have done in the Premier League, right? That Pep's done, Arteta's tried a few of those things this season. Sees Zinchenko playing as a midfielder. He's had these different, facets to their game, but we kind of know how Liverpool play. Is what I'm getting at. And we haven't seen anything to suggest that there might be something different that will freshen up. Like Robert De Zerbi coming in at Brighton, and the centre backs come out and they put their foot on the ball. They stop the ball with the sole of their foot to attract a bit of pressure and play. Like these little, different elements of the game that we're going, wow, that's new. I haven't seen that. And they play in a tiny box. Brighton play in like the size of this room I'm in, with 4 centre mids, and they try and narrow you up, and they did it against Liverpool, and they absolutely schooled Liverpool, I felt. And Liverpool didn't really have a response to it. So I haven't seen if Jurgen Klopp needs his staff to come up with different ideas or principles of play, right? If you haven't, it needs to come from.
Okay, we got to take a break for the news. David Connolly, Johnny Ward, and Dan McDonnell.
That was like you just shut David off there.
The David Connolly remix at the end there, I think, actually. Sorry, just
it's like Andy Farrell is biting his nails and proper order.
Nearly in there.
Like the Bundy Aki try was ruled out first of all, so we went back to 2024 in Ireland's favour. Then Ross Byrne got a penalty to make it a 7-point game, and then initially we were massively on the attack there, and a kick that just went astray, but they were nearly in for a try. 67 minutes on the watch in Rome in the Six Nations. Ireland with the bonus point, but only 7 points in front of the home team. So we'll keep you right up to date after the news of what's going on there. Ireland 27, Italy 20, 4 tries in the Six Nations. Half-timer across the Premier League games, no goals. Everton, Aston Villa, Leeds, Southampton, Leicester, Arsenal, and West Ham against Nottingham Forest. And in the Championship, latest scores, well, it finished Coventry 2, Sunderland 1, but half-time across the board elsewhere. The leaders, Burnley 3, Huddersfield 0. It is Birmingham City 0, Luton 0, Bristol City 0, Hull 0. Norwich 2, Cardiff 0, Preston 0, Wigan 1, QPR 1, Blackburn 2, Reading 1, Blackpool 0, Sheffield United 0, Watford 0, Stoke 0, Millwall 1, and West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0. And in Scotland, Aberdeen 1, Livingston 0, Kilmarnock 1, Motherwell 0, Ross County 2, Dundee United 0, St Johnstone 0, St Mirren 0. All half-time scores. David Connolly, Johnny Ward and Dan McDonnell all with us on Football Saturday between now and 5. You want to text us, you can on 53106. We're back after the news. Don't go away. And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. Ireland are safe. They've got that 5th try, and it's come from Mac Hansen, a second of the game. 34 points to 20. Ireland lead now. They have the cushion, the 77 minutes on the watch in Rome, and a bonus point secured. But it wasn't all Ireland's way, I can tell you that. Only about 10 minutes ago it was 27-20 to Ireland. Initially were on the attack and could have had a try themselves. So I think there'll be lessons learned. But a lot of players are obviously out at the moment, but not the breeze and the stroll that we thought it would be, you know.
Not a bad thing either, though, JD.
No, good thing. There's always things to work on with Andy Farrell's teams, and they keep winning, and that's the thing, the beauty of it, you know.
And I think for the Six Nations as well, the fact that Italy have been so competitive in all their games, notably against France and Ireland, is just is very encouraging for the tournament. And Ireland probably will maybe gain more from this than if they won by 30 points today, and they've had a challenge.
This is Off the Ball Saturday with Football Saturday on Off the Ball, brought to you by Sky. The Premier League is back. Watch every live game for the rest of the season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Delighted to have on the line David Connolly, the former Republic of Ireland striker, and in studio Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist. You can listen across the country on News Talk on your radio, but also watch us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and on the OTB Sports app. Some text on 53106. I hope Liverpool are in terminal decline, but I don't think one can discount the physical and mental impact of last season. The players played really late into last season, had a really short pre-season, and many of their players had the focus of a World Cup. I'm not sure one should rush to judgment, says Aaron. And also, I'm not a Liverpool fan, but how can anybody say Klopp can't turn this around after a poor season, at the end of which they could still finish in the top 4? Yes, they need some new players and freshen up the squad, but to say Klopp has lost the team after a bad run is madness. Had everybody forgotten they finished second in the league and were in the Champions League final last season.
Was it a bit surprising that he kind of gave up on the game? Like, they're 3 goals down against Real Madrid, and I was thinking if they could get it back to 5-3,
not a hope.
Yeah, Liverpool have been able to produce some amazing comebacks. But I
don't think this team in this iteration, if you're a team that's going to Brentford and to Brighton and to Wolves and getting done as they have in the last couple of months, maybe that'll be informing your thinking how easy is it going to be to go to the Bernabeu and win 3.
They probably need to score about 10. The way they're defending at the moment.
That's probably unlikely. So Ireland to 14 points up in the rugby. We just heard the ad there for the game we're doing tomorrow. Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr for Spurs Chelsea. Dan, it's pretty grim society at the moment with social media. I think social media probably should be just got rid of, to be honest. I'd love to be back as a Luddite, to be honest, but I don't think it's going to happen with Graham Potter getting anonymous abuse.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying about social media. I mean, I suppose there are times in life where people have used it positively as well, but it's certainly for people who are you can think at times, social media or various campaigns or raising money and stuff, it can be hugely beneficial. But I clearly, if you're at a certain level, like you need to somehow find the discipline to block your mind out to it, and it's obviously harder and harder, and probably for younger footballers, which is a slightly different debate, but it's one we've touched on before. The Graham Potter one, I mean, it seems like he gave his press conference this week, and naturally he's under scrutiny, and probably managers at different times. I'm not saying this is a tactic. I'm just saying that, like, you obviously have a strategy. You put up the wall and you sort of say, we can handle this, we'll get through this, or you decide to maybe be honest and show a bit of vulnerability, I suppose. And I'm not sure what the line of questioning was that brought Potter down that road, but he did speak openly enough about how things have been very difficult for him. And again, sometimes it looks like there was 2 phases to the press conference, and he spoke about in the first one, and maybe he was followed up on in the second one and brought him along the road where he spoke about initially just sort of mental health and how that was suffering with what was happening, and then the next step does appear to be some sort of bad stuff on social media. So he's decided to discuss it. I'm sure someone has told him there's no harm to do this. I guess you have to sort of weigh it up and how it might be perceived. The position he's in, everything he says is going to be scrutinised and analysed. He's like, I think he's a very impressive fella in terms of where he's come from in his managerial career. But I suppose the one thing about that is that generally the trajectory has been upwards a lot of the time, and you get to a certain stage where it's going against you, and I'd imagine the pressure and even the money they're spending, as much as he's to some degree, you wonder the extent to which he's even involved in a lot of it, that naturally sort of puts pressure. And Chelsea seemed like very determined to brief, like, to people who cover Chelsea, like, he's our man, we're sticking with him. And yet there just seems to be a little bit of a change of tone over the last week. And I don't know, is there some way that you sort of respond to that and say, well, I'm going to try and explain, well, this is affecting me, this is hurting me in some way. But I absolutely feel a fair bit of sympathy for him, although I'd imagine what he's receiving is, unfortunately, it's happening to a lot of people as well too.
Just the quotes, I've had some not particularly nice emails come through. They want me to die. That's obviously not pleasant to receive. You could ask my family how life's been for me, and for them it's not been pleasant at all. If you go to work and somebody's swearing abuse at you, it's not going to be pleasant. You can answer it two ways. I could say I don't care, but I'm lying. Everybody cares what people think because we're hardwired to be socially connected. So David Connolly is well remunerated, and as mad as the game is, we all talk kind of in a football way about, well, should they go, should they stay, or whatever. But I suppose you need to remember there's a human behind it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at Brighton Leeds. I think it was November 2021, and I was working at the game, and it finished 0-0, and the crowd booed, right? And he turned around to the where the media were, where the fans, on that. Behind the dugout as well, and as if to say, what more can I do? Now that's fans booing, right? So he's gone from fans booing at Brighton to obviously he gets the poison chalice that is the Chelsea manager's job, which is, as we know, right, it's better paid, more well remunerated, as you say, more pressure, more expectation, and it's not booing, it's death threats, and I guess that's what comes, unfortunately, with the territory of, it could be managing Brighton, or it's more likely to come from managing a top club like a Chelsea, maybe, where things aren't going well, and it's not nice. It happens at all levels as well, so it's not just at that particular level. And I guess in terms of levels, there's the booing, and then now, so this is all new for Graham Potter, right? Because up to now things have gone pretty well in his managerial career, and now it's the sort of first bump in the road, And I think he's a very considered man and manager. He seems a very empathetic man and a manager. In terms of he talks about his players. I know some players I've played with have played under him. Tell me what he's like. He's very much family, he's very tactile, on the sideline, arms around people, So I think this is the other side of football which he wants to stay away from. And what I do hope, he doesn't listen to people who I've heard this week. He should be shouting and be angry on the side like Mikel Arteta. And I think, well, where's your authenticity then? I mean, he's got to this point in his career by being who he is. You can't just suddenly turn and become a different person to suit other people. So I hope he doesn't have to justify himself anymore in terms of does he get angry or not, or, because he's not on the sideline berating the officials like other managers, and because you want him to have success in his own way, right? Otherwise, every grassroots coach up and down the country will feel that the only way to get success is to be like Mikel Arteta and shouting and bawling, running the whole length of the touchline, and, so I hope it works out for Graham Potter, purely because that filters down. No matter what you say, that filters down. I've been on the sideline. I've been at grassroots. I've seen coaches run past me, 10, 11-year-old kids on the pitch, and I think, what are you doing? You've got Arteta doing that. I know, and you've got Graham. So I hope it works out for Graham Potter, because there's no doubt it filters down, and there's more than one way to win. And I want there to be a different way rather than, the screaming, slanging match on the sideline, which sometimes can be the case if if Arteta wins the league, everyone will think that's the way to manage, and then then I'll be more worried.
We've got to get a full-time report now. Ireland have done it against Italy. An entertaining match and an interesting game. Not fully all Ireland's way. Aisling O'Reilly in Rome.
Yes, John, full-time here in the Stadio Olimpico. It's Italy 20, Ireland 34. And the atmosphere has been absolutely electric from start to finish here. Italy, they continue to play with a lot of confidence in that second half. Very pacey, causing problems. And Ireland, I suppose, John, you could say it was a pretty sloppy performance. The Irish scrum, it's been under pressure consistently. No real flow to their game. Ireland missed 20 tackles in that first half, Italy with 7. So, the Italians defended very well. And it was quite frantic throughout because Italy wanted to run everything. Early in that second half, Ireland had 3 opportunities to take points. They chose not to. I suppose a bit of poor game management there from an Irish point of view at times, because Italy just grew in confidence. But then Ireland emptied the bench, bringing on that experience of Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray, and they started to move the ball better. They went back to basics, and finally Matt Hansen got over for his second try. Conor Murray exceptional in making that happen. Jimmy O'Brien and Jack Crowley come off the bench to make their Six Nations debuts. Matt Hansen pick up the man of the match. With credit to Italy, they've been fantastic, but it's another Ireland bonus point win, so it's job done. Full time, Italy 20, Ireland 34.
Thanks so much, Aisling, for that in Rome. So on to Murrayfield we go in a couple of weeks' time for the Scotland game, and that's on, the 12th of March, then England on Saturday, the 18th of March in Dublin. Ireland, the Grand Slam on. We've won it 3 times, so exciting times for Irish rugby. Exciting times for Newcastle. Johnny, you were saying that tickets are hard to come by for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Man United, Newcastle.
I jumped the gun a bit on OTB AM, kind of like suggesting that I could get Jared tickets. He was looking for tickets for the match. Apparently they're impossible to get. People are paying 4 figures to see it. As you mentioned, JD, it's a rare appearance at this level for Newcastle, who are going through I suppose the most stuttering form they've been on under Eddie Howe, and just goes to show how difficult it is for clubs as well. It's just never ending. You bounce from one game to the next for United, and this is going to be a compelling game the way they're playing at the moment.
Arsenal have scored, and I think this one's going to stand. So they're 1-0 up away to Leicester City. Gabriel Martinelli on 46 minutes. So the only game of the 3 o'clocks that has yielded a goal. Leicester 0, Arsenal 1, West Ham 0, Nottingham Forest 0, Leeds 0, Southampton 0, Everton 0, Aston Villa 0. David Connolly, it is a good story, I suppose, in one way. I'm not going to talk about Saudi Arabia for half an hour, but for Newcastle as a football club, they haven't won a trophy since 1969. So for them to win tomorrow would be a big moment in their history.
Yeah, and I read with interest this week because they were talking about, Newcastle could play in Europe, and in 2005 at Wigan, the season Wigan got into the Premier League, I joined them that season, and we had a brilliant run in this cup. And along the way we beat Newcastle. I scored the winner, I think, in the 5th round, played in the semi against Arsenal. We got to the final, right? And it was like Wigan against Man United in the League Cup final. It was like, wow, amazing occasion. But I was injured. But the point being, all the players' thoughts turned to like, geez, do you reckon would we get into Europe here? And everyone went through the bonus schedule. Geez, there's no European bonus, But the lads, the lads went sort of Dave Whelan with the begging, chairman, there's no European bonus, and we've never been in the cup final, and it's a great occasion playing Man United. And Dave said, well, you should have thought about that at the start of the season. Like, oh my God, is he kidding me? So anyway, he wouldn't amend anything, got to the cup final. In fact, I think there was a bit of a sort of discussion, deliberation about who was going to buy the cup final suits, and I think in the end we got cup final suits, especially for it. But we had to battle for it. But anyway, it's a great occasion for Newcastle. Like it was for Wigan then, reaching the League Cup final. They played Man United. We played Man United. I think United are the favourites. The goalkeeper issue you can't get away from. I think what a disaster. That is
unfair as well. I think that should maybe carry into a different competition. That record, I think so. Yeah, doesn't carry into Europe, does it?
Well, I tell you what is unfair. I tell you what is unfair is that I hate this thing of if a player's played for one club, he's ruled out of like a loan player he can't play against his parent club. All that, I think that's a dreadful rule. You know, I think I don't know why that is, but Dubravka obviously can't play. But I mean, I don't know why. I think from a sporting perspective, right, these lads will be professional no matter who they're playing against. So I don't quite get that, but I think they're up against it. Newcastle done brilliantly to get there, but I think they're up against it in the cup final. I can only see one winner there.
You have to remind me, 2006. This doesn't like spring to mind. 4-0 win for United at Wembley. So Graham Kavanagh played.
Cav played. I mean, it was a great season for us, and to reach the League Cup final, like for Newcastle, you know, it'll be a great occasion, you know. But we didn't get the possible European bonus, but I think because that was in the news this week, and it brought a smile to my face thinking about that.
There'd be a few League of Ireland players in the last decade or so who would empathise with that story. That they would have been in Europe, but they mightn't have necessarily had bonuses for getting through a certain amount of rounds, and then like you get through a round. It's like get through 2 rounds, and it's like, wait a minute. We didn't think this through, you know, in terms of like agreeing a percentage at the start of the year or something like that. So I can imagine going to the owner and Dave Phelan or someone saying you should have thought of this. It's classic. Classic.
I mean, you don't get to his position by folding in negotiation. You know, that was a lesson learned. Yeah.
No, you had it.
John O'Shea played for United that day in 2006. What do you think? He's back in the Irish coaching squad now, David. This week it was announced.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, look, great career, fantastic fella. I imagine the lads love him. I don't know him as a coach, but, you know, I think he'll be a great addition and could be future manager, right? I mean, you know, 110 caps or whatever he's got. Who's to say he can't, you know, that succession plan, Stephen was part of it himself, you know. So what would stop Josh being the number one in a few years? Nothing, I don't think.
John O'Shea.
Sorry, and I think the bit of continuity as well, you know, is needed at this stage, City. There's been so much upheaval, and it's been very unfortunate, I think, for Stephen Kenny when you're trying to put your stamp on proceedings, and you know you keep losing staff, but I suppose anecdotally from what I would have heard from the under-21s, he's just what David said there. John O'Shea is a very, very popular guy. They like playing for him, and it's all systems go now. I think Ireland have a lot of probably more question marks in terms of player selection than you would have thought would have been the case. Some good, maybe some not so good. But this is good news, and maybe we can have some optimism about the campaign.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's in the circumstances. I mean, there was obviously chat about Anthony Barry coming back, and that was definitely discussed, and Barry decided against going down that road. Like ideally, like you wanted the smoothest transition possible, and I suppose, you know, somebody coming in who has worked with a lot of the players, including some of the 21s or some who've come from the 21s, like in a coaching capacity. Like, you know, he would have worked with Evan Ferguson, for example.
Right,
you know, they would have been involved in the playoff against Israel last year, and maybe the likes of Will Smallbone, and so and others who he would have spent time with, senior players. He'd have a relationship with them. Obviously, it's a different dynamic when you're their coach, you know, than your teammate, naturally enough. But I think it's definitely preferable at this stage than bringing in someone who is spending the week, you know, you come in on the Monday at a French game, getting to know you. Now, of course, there's one thing knowing someone, and it's another thing, like, you know, you're out in the training pitch, and it's, you'd prefer not to be in this situation. But I think in terms of making the best of that situation, I think this is probably a decent enough outcome. And I think O'Shea has like built up a bit of, it's not just his Irish stuff. He's at Reading, like he was in a prominent enough position, and Stoke, he's got like, you know, quite a few years under his belt, and I do think that longer term, he's someone that you could see being Ireland manager one day. You always maybe have these ideas, like 5 years ago you start naming people, that person will definitely manage Ireland, and actually you might find you've changed your opinion.
Roy Keane.
The Roy Keane one.
Keane.
Yeah, like these are the ones you probably would have assumed that might happen someday, and now you'd have to think it'd be less likely. But I suppose the only thing about O'Shea, like I know he's had opportunities, I think, to go out and manage as a number one in recent times in the UK, and it's a big sort of first step when you take that leap, and would he ever feel he'd need to do that before taking on Ireland in some way? I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I suppose in many respects it depends how things go for Kenny in this campaign. How long is he there? And I suppose it goes from that.
Big goal down the bottom. Audie Watkins, penalty spot, scores again for Villa. 1-0 they lead Everton at Goodison Park in the second half. Leeds 0, Southampton 0, Leicester 0, Arsenal 1. Gabriel Martinelli with a goal, 1-0 lead for Arsenal. West Ham 0, Nottingham Forest 0. We won the rugby and a bonus point. 5 tries, 34-20 against Italy in Rome, but it wasn't a plain sailing the whole way for Ireland. But that's a good sign for the Scotland game. Things to work on. Kenboy, 15-8 favourite, winning the Bobby Joe Chase at Ferryhouse for Paul Tan and Winnie Mullins. The Dovecote Novices Hurdle at Kempton has been won by Rubo. Another win there for Paul Nichols on the card. And get a game scores that are coming through to us. We have a few coming through. A very interesting score from the Women's Football League. The All-Ireland champions, Meath, beaten well by Kerry, 118 to 9 points full time there. In the Camogie League Division 1A, Tipperary beating Dublin 213 to 16. So these are the latest scores from that league. Antrim 3-9, Fermanagh 213. That is a full time from Corrigan Park in Belfast. A 1 point win for Fermanagh there. And in Division 4, Waterford 1-2, Wexford 1-3 is the latest score. David Connolly, just before we go to the break, are Man United in the title race in your view, the way they're burning at the moment with momentum?
Geez, yeah. I would say they have to be in a discussion, right? I mean, I guess I'm sure Rashford will be fit, right? But I don't know, we touched on earlier different players, they're not just solely reliant on one player. But look, he has got 25 goals if suddenly something happened to him. But let's say he's fit. The players they've signed, really good characters. They've got they get an impact off the bench. Every time he seems to make a sub, they come on and have an impact. Anthony scoring the other night, Sancho coming on before that, amongst the goals. So his subs are doing well. I think, they're still 6 points behind, right? But Arsenal got to play Man City in April. Of course they're in the conversation. I think out of the three of them, I'd still think they're the third favourites of the top three. But I think everyone would probably say that as well, right? But they're certainly in and amongst it. And, what an impact he's had. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there was a connection now with the fans that hasn't seemed to have been there for a while. Old Trafford, through the speakers, through the TV, really sounded good the other night. And I've been there and it's generally like the moon. So I was quite impressed by that, I have to say.
Yeah, you could really tell that the other night, couldn't you?
There's something brewing there. Yeah. There's something, connection. And Ten Hag seems to know what he's doing in a big way. And he plays attacking football. And I think that's certainly to be lauded.
I think Casemiro's been
huge. He's an absolute fulcrum of the team. Yeah.
And they've great... you look at Liverpool at the moment and you're looking for kind of characters to get them through a difficult time, and they're not really emerging. Man United, they've a team, they've gotten rid of Ronaldo and they've a team full of characters all of a sudden. And he's done an amazing job. He really has.
Got to take a break on Football Saturday. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, Johnny Ward and David Connolly, the former Republic of Ireland striker, on the line. You want to text us 53106. We'll be back in a moment. Talk Football Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you as always until 5. We won the rugby, 34 points to 20 in Rome. The Grand Slam is on for Ireland. 5 tries, but not all our own way. So things to work on for the Scotland game in a couple of weeks. This is Football Saturday with David Connolly on the line, the former Republic of Ireland striker. And in studio we have Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent and a broadcaster and journalist, Johnny Ward. In the Premier League, Arsenal leading. And we're watching it here, 1-0 up away to Leicester. Martinelli with the goal. West Ham have scored a couple of quick goals against Nottingham Forest by Danny Ings getting 2 in 3 minutes. So that's interesting at the London Stadium as they bid to stay up. Leeds 0, Southampton 0, and a big goal for Audie Watkins and a bad goal for Everton to concede. Everton 0, Aston Villa 1, that game at Goodison Park. In the Championship, Coventry 2, Sunderland 1 a result. Birmingham 0, Luton 1 is the latest. Bristol City 1, Hull 0. Burnley 3, Huddersfield 0. Norwich 2, Cardiff 0 the latest. Preston 2, Wigan 1. QPR 1, Blackburn Rovers 3. Reading 2, Blackpool 0. Sheffield United 0, Watford 0. Stoke 0, Millwall 1. and West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0. As I speak, subject to VAR, Reading have gone 3-0 up now against Blackpool in Scotland. No Celtic and Rangers, obviously they're playing tomorrow. Aberdeen 1, Livingston 0, Kilmarnock 1, Motherwell 0, Ross County 4, Dundee United 0, and St Johnstone 0, St Mirren 0. Text here on 53106. We have a text in from Adrian, who hi John, made a trip to Cove last night to watch Ramblers in Wexford. It's been a while since I've been in the game, but it was 90 minutes of end-to-end entertaining football. Great crowd and an atmosphere as well. Well worth the trip.
Yeah, just to mention, obviously Shane Keegan, friend of the show,
Of this parish.
So took the Cove job on, and I think one of the things about Cove Ramblers is they're probably quite reliant on Cork City being good, so that they can pick up sort of the players maybe at that level down who are not maybe good enough to play for Cork City. But whatever Shane has done, 2 great wins, and the crowds across the League of Ireland have been a revelation so far, Jiddy. And it was 1,300 people at the game. That might not seem a lot, but it is by Cove standards. That's a good crowd. Great little ground. Like, it's so quaint. I don't know if...
Did you see the winning goal? I'll tell you what, if it was subject to VAR now, there would have been a bit of a question mark. The next time we have Shane Keegan in talking about VAR, it was a header that the goalkeeper, the Wexford goalkeeper, pushed back, and according to the assistant referee, the referee was from behind the line. A questionable call. I got a few messages from irate Wexford people last night. I'm sure Shane will be extolling the benefits of not having VAR. Just let things be decided.
They have a playoff system as well, JD, in the first division, such that if you finish 5th, you get into the playoff. It keeps. I'm not entirely a fan of it to an extent. I think it kind of favours the clubs that are more sort of 5th and 2nd, for example, but it makes things exciting. And there's so many teams in the first division now who think they have a chance of finishing 5th. Athlone won their first 2 games, perennial strugglers as well. And Shane, Shane's time at Galway United kind of ended disappointingly, but he's a real believer in playing good football. He talks a good game, but his teams play very well, and Cove are right in the playoff picture.
I kind of wondered myself after the first few weeks, if you had double the capacity in all these grounds, would they be full?
No, they wouldn't. And I think it's overplayed as well, in the sense that, like, there were 4 sellouts last night, but you can pretty much get a ticket to a League of Ireland game if you want to go. Shamrock Rovers are going to have 10,000.
Johnny's obviously got tickets. Johnny can get you tickets anywhere.
Can't get you tickets.
Now, you would have got maybe not double, but you're definitely turning away a large number of people. Like, I know people who wanted to go to Bows last night, you couldn't go.
Bows would be
they couldn't get in. They'd be the main one in terms of their capacity. And they, in fairness to Bows, they were proactive. They've done some work over the winter. Other clubs could learn from being a bit more proactive. Just even though they're moving, or not, they're not moving. They're like, Dalymount has been redeveloped, so like they're doing stuff for a short term, to sort of put a bandage over the wound until it's sort of fixed properly. But they've managed to create more space for their fans, and it's great. But they're still turning people away. And Derry, I think in particular, like, their crowds read very small on paper. Like, I think it's something whatever 3,500, but they could have many more at their games. So they're going to have to address that. So I think maybe not double, but you have to think big, because people would have said there was a time the Shamrock Rovers didn't need to increase the capacity in Tala based on their average attendances, and as the stadiums got bigger, their average attendances have got bigger. It's a better experience for people to go. So I think sometimes in the league they make decisions based on the average case scenario, or even sometimes the worst case scenario, and you have to think bigger. But obviously you need the funds. I think all this attention is great. I mean, we're obviously loving it, but I still watch some of it. You hear about a sellout ground and a bit of drama, and I went home last night and tried to watch highlights from certain games, and so many of the stadiums still look so absolutely terrible that it makes you despair that we didn't get this stuff in order a long time ago, and you just have to keep driving home that message. So you had interesting guests at St. Pat's last night. Yeah, so the Turkish Simon Cowell, as he's known. That's
actually his name.
That's just, it's Akon Ilikali, and my pronunciation may be up, but he's the owner of Hull City. And there has been a story. So he took over Hull City, I think it's only in the last year. He would have made a sudden change with Grant McCann. The manager was turfed out, and Shota Arveladze came in, and then eventually they've ended up with Liam Ross Senior now as the manager. But anyway, he's spoken about his dream of taking over a club in another country that they could that Hull can send some of their younger players there, and there's probably a bit of a Brexit workaround as well too, where pretty hard to bring some players into the UK at a certain age now or without meeting certain criteria, and a gateway country can be beneficial. So it's been a Hull City bingo at the moment, because the story has been out there that they're looking at Dundalk, and Liam Senior, the Hull manager, very frank about it in his press conference on Thursday, to the point that I think people in Dundalk found it extremely bizarre that this was speaking very openly about this, to the point where he even made a reference to like playing styles being aligned, which was a massive red flag. Now I think there was a quote that was slightly taken out of context. I would say that. I mean, it wasn't 100% taken out of context though, but it was slightly taken out of context, and that
it was eye-catching.
It drew an angry response in Dundalk, the idea of being a feeder club. But then anyway, it's sort of I think Neil O'Riordan initially yesterday mentioned there was a possibility, or that there was degree of certainty that Hull City officials would be at the game with Shelbourne officials, and sure enough, in Richmond Park, the director's box is right next to the press box. So you see all this happening, and there's like Hull officials. There is actually the Hull City owner is there with a couple of Hull heads. So they're playing the field here. It's like sort of a first dates or something, or it's a speed dating type thing where they're just going around clubs in Ireland going, "What have you got for me?"
Can I make any X Factor or You Got Talent jokes?
Absolutely.
Go for it. What have you got?
Yeah.
Or is that it?
That's it.
You were threatening.
That's the joke.
I thought you had one sort of lined up.
Scratching in my mind, what does Simon Cowell get involved in?
But then you have in the Daily Mail today in the UK, and like Matt Hughes in a sort of in a sports news column mentions that the Bournemouth owner Bill Foley is also looking at Dundalk.
He's an American.
Well. He's an American. So
I did all the owners of the Premier League with Pat Kenny during the week. So
So there you go. Well, I mean, Dundalk have had a bit of history with Americans called Bill, but again, like this whole idea of the multi-club model is a big talking point. You have the Fleetwood Waterford one at the moment. We've mentioned a couple of times with Johnny Walters, and there's no doubt that clubs in the UK and investors are looking at Ireland more. And it's hard to go into that in a sort of a 2-minute discussion, but there's the Brexit factor, player production here. Irish players are carrying a bit of a value at the moment. They can get into the UK easier than other players, so people are looking at it. People have some unease around it, because does this affect your identity in some ways? But like, you can definitely spin it. I'm certainly aware anecdotally, like there's multiple other clubs have had approaches from and are looking at this as well.
Michael Obafemi scored.
Wow!
Oh, there we go.
So
there's a lot. There's a lot of this going on, and there will be more of it, because even the profile of a lot of the people who are buying clubs in the UK now is people who want to have something on their portfolio. They want to have like they're looking at sort of Man City led the way with a lot of this stuff, but people, with the City Football Group and their clubs spread all over the place. These are obviously more like boutique versions of that people are looking at here, but it's a little bit of intrigue to be looking at the director's box to see who might be here this week. And the Turkish Simon Cowell, TV producer, PR guy, he's definitely not shy of the cameras.
We've a new Minister for Sport as well, in Thomas Byrne, and I understand the attempts to kind of get him on board what Irish football wants to happen in terms of money coming in from betting, or certainly from the government. That task has already begun, and I think the League of Ireland needs to sell the potential that we have, JD, with young players in this country. And
he was in Drogheda last night, Thomas Byrne. He actually put out
to be his local.
He put out he put out a tweet at the match after the match, talking about how the league could be on the cusp of getting to the next level.
Didn't see that.
So that's great and all, but like you say that, you have to follow up. Like Micheál Martin was in here with Joe at one point talking about we need to invest.
Jerry Maguire, show me the money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's getting to that stage.
If his two local grounds are Dundalk and Drogheda, like you'd be ashamed to bring anyone to both of them. They're absolute kips, the two of them. And in fairness, both clubs will acknowledge that, and it's very difficult. But let's hope, JD, and I come from the racing kind of parish as well, but I think
I just to be clear, it's not on the clubs that you're putting that statement. You're not putting that on the clubs.
Oh, listen, I think
the grounds.
Yeah. I think there's a collective responsibility that historically, not necessarily people who are there now, but I don't think
long wanted to
we don't need to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't think I think like they would. There's people from various clubs would be on record at various times of saying they're embarrassed by it, and it's a historic thing. They would argue that they haven't availed of the council support that other clubs would have, and certainly like Louth Council, you would say, given the success that the sport has brought to the county in recent times. And I'm from the county, so I can speak about it.
Don't have a loud accent anymore.
Well, no. Yeah. But they would be pretty average in my view.
The floodgates have opened at the London Stadium. 4 goals in the last 20 minutes. 2 from Danny Ings, 1 from Declan Rice, 1 from Mikel Antonio. So West Ham 4, Nottingham Forest 0, Leicester 0, Arsenal 1, Gabriel Martinelli. Leeds have scored massive goal in the Premier League. Junior Firpo, and obviously it's the first game for Javi Gracia, and Everton are 2-0 down. So it's amazing how it can all go. Emi Buendia's got the second for Villa. Ollie Watkins got the first.
You mentioned Burnley as well, JD. Just can you imagine the prospect of Obafemi and
Josh Cullen?
So Josh Cullen, I mean, I was going to ask David, how many of Liverpool's 10 outfield players would you say like is a definite starter any week, or should be a definite starter the way he's playing? And some of them you'd be like, well, he's not having a great season. The Ireland situation, like Josh Cullen is probably literally the first player, certainly the first outfield player on the team sheet, and Burnley's points tally is staggering. And I don't know,
sometimes it doesn't translate to the chat. Sometimes you can have a team winner with 100 points.
Absolutely,
it doesn't translate.
But can you imagine Evan Ferguson, David, up front with Obafemi?
It's obviously. I mean, I tipped Michael Obafemi at the start of the season. I look a bit of an idiot. I thought it would be one of the top goal scorers, to be honest. At Swansea this season, obviously, for various, he never seemed happy there. We knew that he wanted to get out. He's got out now. He seems happy. I think that the real challenge would be for Burnley, and obviously Everton's going to be the future of Irish football, right? I mean, it's just whether Stephen would want to play with, does he play the way he does at times because he doesn't have 2 strikers? Would he say
that's such a big point. Like, this is the thing that at times they've played like, I mean, sometimes you go into numbers and but sometimes it's like the 3-4-1-2 and sometimes it's a 3-4-3, and there's been at times where you see that Stephen like wants the central striker, but then you have like a Jamie McGrath, or you've even Troy Parrott, 2 players who can drop deep and sort of help in the midfield department. But this is the thing, if you want to play Evan Ferguson and Obafemi, that does change the shape around it, doesn't it, David? Like, that's the debate you face. Yeah,
exactly. And but I think that then shows you Stephen as a coach. Does he have a way of playing and the players fit that way, or does he adjust his style of play to the players that come along?
He did that, David. Yeah, and in fairness, like
I think Evan Ferguson. No, I think like David's right. Like Obafemi, I think he got into the idea of Obafemi being a number 9 actually for him. But clearly now Evan Ferguson, the way he seems to hold the ball up and bring others into the play, the vibes would be that there's an acknowledgement that yes, like he is going to be the player. So then you have to formulate your plan around him. I suppose the question is, do you think in all of those combinations, David, that it's automatically then a back 3, or do you have to open your mind? It could just be a straight 3-5-2, right, where you have those 2, but do you think you maybe have to, I don't know, rethink it in other ways?
Yeah, I think you would, because I mean the only thing I'd say is, say moving forward, right, he'll have Stephen will be next season. Burnley go up, right? So they go up. Okay. How many games will Michael play in the Premier League for Burnley? Because so many people have tried to play their way in the Championship, and I've been in that position at a club, at top of the table, and you might have a particular way of playing, and it's great. The big challenge is, can you then bring that and still play that way in the Premier League? Because Norwich have tried it, with varying success, getting up, playing a possession-based game, and all the nuances that company's doing that he's taken from Guardiola and all these other people. Can you go and do that in the Premier League? Because, and where will Obafemi fit into that team in the Premier League, as opposed to Brighton? You would think, no matter how they play, there is a place for Evan Ferguson in that team down through the middle, whereas for Burnley, can't really say that place is there for Obafemi, which will make it difficult then for Stephen, because he won't see him as regularly to go, right, I could go over 2 or I could go over 1.
He's been
and one off.
Yeah, he's been very good, Obafemi, for Ireland. I think in it's, obviously the Scotland game comes to mind, but like if we're fearful of, I mean, you got to be a bit petrified about Mbappe, right? So there's literally, when Mbappe is 1-on-1, there's essentially almost nobody that can do anything to stop his pace or whatever. But on the flip side, Stephen Kenny will approach the France game and say France have a little bit to be afraid of as well, because France can't leave loads of space in behind if you've Obafemi and Ferguson up front, because not only would it be a dynamic partnership, but Obafemi is really, really quick, and hopefully he'll be coming into the game full of confidence that he might have gotten a run with Burnley, and we're going to have potentially a very exciting team. I think it's going to be probably a 3-5-2. I think if he plays them two, but up front. But it's very exciting, JD.
Okay, just before we go, Shamrock Rovers and Man United, just briefly on Rovers, no wins from 2 games so far.
9 men Rovers last night.
2 players sent off last night. I went home and sort of watched the last half hour of that game, and yeah, I mean, like their first 2 games away from home, they've been 1-0 up, they've conceded in the last couple of minutes of the game, and they've had people sent off, and they now have a situation where they play Derry next Friday, at home without their 3 first choice, you could argue, centre halves, and they're going to have to do a serious patchwork job. So listen, they have a history in their title wins of dropping more points in the first half of the season than the second. But it's
the problem is Derry now.
Yeah, the problem is more so Derry than maybe them. So that's going to be a proper. Like, Rovers haven't played at home yet this season because they're getting some just refurbishments done on Tala with a view to the big refurbishment that's coming down the track. So it's going to be brilliant there next Friday night. But for like 3 games in, it's a big game.
Aidan Delaney, our producer, was highlighting that Eric Ten Hag has warned the referee David Coote tomorrow to keep an eye on Newcastle because they waste so much time. I saw Newcastle play Spurs, and Eddie Howe, as beautifully nice as he is on the camera, I'm telling you, they are a team that really engaged in the dark arts. They waste time, they committed like little sneaky fouls. They're tough, and it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow.
One thing you got to say about Ten Hag,
like
what about his clobber? I mean, he's wearing this kind of coat that's like a cross between like a communist leader and Gucci or whatever. He's really, really sharp looking man.
Well, John from Rathfarnham has said, hi folks, why ignore the elephant in the room when talking about Man United, the favouritism they receive in games when they need it. For example, the Bruno goal against City, the non-red card against Leicester, Rashford's goal, in inverted commas, in the same game was obviously offside. The loading of the opposition with yellow cards when Casemiro can kick people at will. Nothing magical about Ten Hag. The dice preloaded in his favour.
He sounds exactly like a 13-year-old Johnny Ward who thought Man United got all the decisions under Ferguson, except I was actually right at the time.
It is very much milk tray turtleneck, isn't it? He's wearing Eric Ten Hag.
Oh, it's a banger of an outfit, yeah.
How's it going to go tomorrow in the League Cup final, David Connolly?
I think, as I touched on earlier, I think I can only see one winner. You presume? I think Rashford, say he's fit, right? I mean, or not. I think United will win. I think it will be tough. Don't get me wrong. Newcastle don't concede a lot of goals, but can you imagine? There's not too many other sports where you're playing. I mean, there's only 2 cup finals you can play in a year. They've reached one of them, and they've got to play a goalkeeper by the looks of it who hasn't played a game in 2 years. I mean, it's kind of unfathomable, really, right? You can go into such a big game, 80, 90,000. You can do all the training you want. You can do all the imaginary, goalkeeping you want in your room, sat there. But if you haven't been doing it for 2 years, I mean, and I think Eddie's been saying that they've been training away. I mean, come on. Training and then going to play.
I just hope for his sake, as a human level, that nothing goes wrong from tomorrow, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. Arsenal have 2 minutes left in injury time to hold on here.
They made Zinchenko captain today, which was interesting.
I think he's just gone off. Actually, I honestly thought he was
year on from
I thought he was brilliant signing Zinchenko. I think Arsenal have signed well, and they're on the attack now. And this is it's another really big day in the title race. Wouldn't be certain Man City will win it at Bournemouth as well. So Arsenal look like they're holding on, JD.
A statement: Alex Zinchenko is our captain today as a mark of respect and love on the first anniversary of the conflict in Ukraine.
Cracking player. Like you see when he
centre midfield.
Yeah, and he's so good. Like he could literally play pretty much anywhere, and brilliant player and a brilliant professional as well.
As things stand, Leeds are going to be ahead of. So David, go on.
I was going to say, have you seen this City team? Because it looks like they're starting Alvarez and Haaland. So, I mean, he's Pep's going for it in terms of goals. So I can't recall too many times those two have started together. But that's what he's done.
Definitely not.
And Foden back in as well. Yeah.
Coming off,
Foden is going to be, I think they really miss Foden.
He started 3 of the last 10 Premier League games, I think, Foden. So, but they seem to think since the World Cup he was affected more than most.
Ederson in goal, Lewis, Akanji, Diaz and Ake. So Rico Lewis back in. Gundogan, Rodri in the holding positions. Foden, Alvarez, Grealish and Haaland.
That's an attacking team. Neto,
Zamora, Zanesi, Mepham, Stephen Smith. The back 5 for Bournemouth, Traore, Billing, Lerma, Otara and Solanke. At the moment, Everton go back into the relegation zone. 2-0 down against Aston Villa in injury time at the end of this. Leeds 1, Southampton 0. Leicester 0, Arsenal 1. So that is finished. Leeds have won 1-0 and West Ham 4, Nottingham Forest 0. And in the Championship, very briefly, Coventry 2, Sunderland 1 at full time. Latest scores: Birmingham 0, Luton 1, Bristol City 1, Hull 0, Burnley 4, Huddersfield 0, full time Norwich 2, Cardiff 0. Latest scores: Preston 2, Wigan 1, QPR 1, Blackburn 3. It is Reading 3, Blackpool 0, Sheffield United 1, Watford 0, Stoke 0, Fulham, Stoke 0, Millwall 1 is the result now. It's just gone in. And West Brom 2, Middlesbrough 0. And in Scotland, Aberdeen 1, Livingston 0. It has ended. Kilmarnock 1, Motherwell 1. Ross County 4, Dundee United 0 is the latest. And St Johnstone 1, St Mirren 1. David Connolly, thanks so much.
Cheers, guys. Take care, everyone.
Mind yourself, Dan and Johnny. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in as always for Football Saturday here. Don't forget, tomorrow, folks, we got Off the Ball with Joe Malloy in studio in the chair from 1 to 7 on News Talk. Live and exclusive commentary of the Premier League showdown between Tottenham Hotspur and Chelsea, with Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr providing the call. Also the Sunday paper review and a look back on Ireland's win over Italy today. It was 34 points to 20 in the end. The Grand Slam is still on, so be sure to join us tomorrow for some great commentary and conversation. If you missed any of OTB Football Saturday with David Connolly, Dan McDonnell
Full time as well.
Ward,
Full time in Leicester, JD.
Full time, Leicester 0, Arsenal 1, or Mark Lawrence's tribute to John Motson if you missed that, or the Saturday panel reviewing the week with Sarah O'Donovan and Conor McKeown. You can find the podcast on the OTB Sports app or listen back wherever you get your pods. Arsenal stretching their lead at the top of the Premier League. They've beaten Leicester 1-0. We'll speak tomorrow at 1. Bye bye.